You're listening to Talk Daredevil, the official podcast of the Save Daredevil campaign.
Welcome to another episode of Talk Daredevil, the official podcast of the Save Daredevil campaign. I'm Christine, and joining me today are...
Hi, I'm Kristina.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon.
So we are picking up on a little topic that came up during our 3-year anniversary podcast, which is the whole concept of what all these rumors about a soft reboot, what kind of future are we looking at for this show or for like a possible return, and what does that mean? So we wanted to just spend some time discussing sort of the concept of a reboot, what it means, how it compares to what you might see in the comics, and what it might mean for us. And yeah, just have kind of an interesting conversation about it. But before we start, we should probably maybe even try to, define what a reboot is. If we go to a fine source, if it's, popular culture, Urban Dictionary, the first definition of a reboot is to start anew with fresh ideas in a way that is consistent with the principles of the original, but not unnecessarily constrained by what has taken place before, which is not as funny as some of the Urban Dictionary definitions tend to be, but it's quite apt for our purposes here. I guess, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this is like just kind of some of the rumors that have been swirling around, and maybe not to address them specifically, but what are your guys' thoughts about when sort of the soft reboot conversation comes up?
Well, when I first heard this rumor about a soft reboot, I'm going to admit ignorance and say, I thought, okay, what does that mean? I knew reboot, got it. I knew renewal, I knew revive. I did not know what a soft reboot meant. And I once again went to some dubious sources on the internet and found a couple. One of them I found in Quorum, which was a soft reboot is a continuation of an established movie series that ignores certain events from that series. I also saw something else that said soft reboot follows pre-existing story while still starting anew in many ways. Hard reboot, in turn, allows any kind of changes and doesn't expand the old canon. So it's interesting that soft reboot, that whole phrase seems kind of nebulous, and it doesn't seem like it's really easy to define. But if you look at just like kind of all of these different definitions, what it seems to say is that certain aspects are going to be the same and certain aspects are going to be different.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's a great summation of it. Some things will be the same, some things will be different. Soft reboot to me makes... I don't know why I immediately soft reboot. I was like, okay, it's, the same characters and the same tone, or, maybe even a slightly different tone, but, same characters, but maybe not the whole same history, not the same questions to be answered. So I went out and I started searching rather than definitions for examples. And I think the reason that this is so hard to wrap our mind around is it's not really something that happens in television much. Kristina, even what you found was in movies, like a movie franchise soft rebooting, but we don't see it in television. We see hard reboots. Like this next year, they're doing a Saved by the Bell. They've done Battlestar Galactica. You see all kinds of those, but you don't frequently see a soft reboot in television. But you see it all the time in comics. You could essentially look at every time a new writer takes over a comic as somewhat of a soft reboot, because they're going to forget details from the past. They're going to, have a certain tone. They're going to go a certain way. So I think it's very easy to think of from a comic standpoint. So I almost think of it as you have a different artist coming at the material, but it's the same essential character.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, I came to this show from the comics originally, and you see this a lot where, one interesting thing about the comics is that on paper, canon is always canon. Like everything that happened kind of always did happen, even though some of it is stuff like really, did that really need to happen? My favorite example is always the weirdest issue ever, which is the second issue of the comic where Daredevil is sent into space and then lands in Central Park by listening to the absence of heartbeats. It's an absolutely ridiculous story that I like to prefer to pretend it never happened, but technically it did. But I mean, of course, 40 years down the line or 50 years, like no one's going to ever have to address that. And especially in comics, when canon gets extremely convoluted, which it does over many decades, that can be, I mean, I know in the DC universe, they do actual sort of hard-ish reboots quite frequently to kind of keep the record or the canon less convoluted and so on. But it's really, even in the comics, there are very different ways of just sort of addressing things that supposedly happened in the past. Of course, with our show, we have something that is very uncluttered. It's a brief 3 seasons of a television show that is sort of nice and clean. Not that it doesn't contain contradictory things in it. It sort of does. I think even the fact that there's even a weird kind of time gap in the show where it's like, exactly how many years ago were they in college and when did they start the firm? I mean, there are all of these kinds of those sort of glitches in the matrix that are interesting. And even there's a slight sort of retcon kind of thing with Father Lantom in season 3 and so on. So even in the show, we're seeing some of this stuff kind of being flexible, even in just 3 seasons of a show.
I think that's a great point. That even though Marvel Studios has a person in charge of continuity, I can't remember what the exact title is, they screw up. There's the big Far From Home 5 years earlier or something like that. Or, there's like a thing, and somebody asked Feige about it, and he was like, yeah, we just screwed up. Like, there's changes in continuity even when you go on a complete path. So, but usually, or hopefully, when you have a chance to sort of just only be bound to the continuity you want, there's room for improvement. I mean, I'm trying to put a positive spin on all of this because I know a lot of our fans are nervous about this. We obviously all want to see Maggie and Matt and just how that relationship grows and everything. But even if we don't get to see that, there could be improvements to things that were lacking.
That is so true, too. And I think also from Marvel's point of view, since they are, if hopefully Charlie comes back as Daredevil, it will necessarily be in things that are Disney / Marvel stuff, such as, the movies, their own television shows. It's going to be separate. It's going to be on a, if it's on the Disney Plus streaming platform, that's a different platform than Netflix. So they are obviously going to want to not rely too much on every potential viewer having seen the first 3 seasons. Yes, if it makes sense to reference something that has come before, to create kind of a richness around the character, that's great. But they will want to not be too bound by this notion that people have seen all of what has come before. So for them, it makes sense to do this. And I think also too, it can be sort of a clean slate in terms of like maybe looking back on the shows or on the first 3 seasons and being sort of like, yes, this was something we really liked. This should, move over to whatever new project Daredevil might appear in. Or some things we could just kind of forget about. Like personally, The World on Fire, something that I think they even forgot about because it was only in one episode in season 1. And I was not a big fan of that effect. Maybe come up with a different effect that's better. Something like that could be a point of improvement.
I think that Marvel is not made up of idiots. The people who are at Marvel are very smart and they're very savvy as to what's going on. And they are in a position where they're probably thinking to themselves, here I am saying that like I have ESP or whatever. But what they're probably thinking is, how can we bring in a brand new audience and not royally piss off the audience that this show already had? So my feeling is by doing a soft reboot, they could put themselves in a situation where they cannot really mention what happened in those first 3 seasons without having to directly contradict it. I think that that is something they can do. I don't know if it's something they will do, but I think it's possible. Like, we could very well have a scene with Matt and Foggy arguing, because come on, they argue, and having Foggy saying, Matt, don't keep something from me again, and just leave it. And have the new audience go, okay, clearly they have a history where he has kept things from him. And we would go, oh, we know what he's talking about. There is no reason for them to say, Matt, don't keep something from me again. Like that time you kept from me that you were the man in the mask and I walked into your apartment and you were bleeding half to death in the living room. That's not necessary. They really don't need to do that.
Or even it could be more of a don't disappear on me again, without having to blatantly, don't make me worry that you're dead again. Like, there's all kinds of things like that can give the character richness from day one when it enters the Marvel Universe and be satisfying for the longtime fans, but not overly confusing for those that have never watched it before. We have no idea what rumors are true, but there seems to be very solid rumors about Spider-Man. It could even be in that, like, oh, I've represented really bad people before, or, like, there could be a Punisher reference or something like that just sounds offhand, like any attorney would say it, but not openly referencing, oh, here's whole season 2 of Daredevil.
Very good point. And I think another thing that puts us in a good position going forward is that I know some people have been like, oh, but we don't need any more of the show because season 3 had such a, perfect ending. It was a perfect way to end the series, which of course all of us are like, no, we want more. But they do have a point in that it came to a very nice conclusion as sort of like a first chapter of this, or even like the first book in a book series or something where it's like, where it continues on. Like, it was a nice kind of a nice close to like the first chapter, which means that these characters were left in a position that is perfect for the kind of like soft reboot, whatever exactly that'll mean in this case. But where it is a perfect point to start something new, because it was a conclusion of one storyline, and now it could be the beginning of a new storyline with a nice clean sort of break. But like you said, like, things have happened before. We don't need to reference everything. This could be a perfect example of how you do show, don't tell. No, it's like you said, we don't need all of that exposition about like, well, exactly this happened. It could just be, especially whenever you're watching a work of fiction, you're looking at characters that, even though they're fictional characters, you come into this person's fictional life, but with the assumption that, he or she's had a history. So it's the same kind of thing here. So I do think it can be done quite smoothly, and that we probably shouldn't be too concerned about the huge risks here.
And this is something I would love to hear the two of your opinions on this, because I was thinking about, this is not a perfect example because this is not what we want, but I'm thinking about the MCU version of Spider-Man. Of course, they got a new actor. We are absolutely against that. We don't want to see that happen with Daredevil. But when they introduced his character, they skipped the whole he was bitten by a radioactive spider. They skipped Uncle Ben being killed. And I think the reason they did it is like, unless you've lived under a rock, you already know this. My kid, who had never read a comic and never seen any of the Spider-Man films, knew that Spider-Man got his power by being bitten by a radioactive spider. Like, it's just part of the popular culture. And they made the decision of, we're not going to even do that. We're just going to start and tell a story. Do you think that the Daredevil mythology is well known enough that they do not have to do an origin?
Obviously, Daredevil is not as well known as Spider-Man, obviously. Where I grew up in Sweden, I had never heard of Daredevil until the Daredevil movie came out in 2003, where Spider-Man was world famous. I'd read Spider-Man as a kid. His comics were translated into Swedish, as was Superman. I read Superman comics as well. I had never heard of Daredevil. I know it was actually the comic was translated for a few years during the Frank Miller years in the 80s, but that's about it. However, I think that both with the existence of the show, even to an extent the existence of, even the Daredevil movie way back when, and also the fact that I think with this type of like what they're doing MCU type storytelling. I don't feel like they're bound by some kind of formula to do that sort of very like 1, 2, 3 step-by-step origin story. Because that's one of the things that the MCU has been really good at, is just sort of kind of breaking the mold for how you do a superhero movie. There's so many different ways of doing it. There's so many different ways of introducing a character. Even though, of course, new characters will have some kind of origin moment to them, that moment doesn't even have to happen at the beginning of the movie or the show or whatever. It could be something through, some flashback here and there, a memory, something that Matt tells some other character. It can just be gradually unveiled in a way that I think feels more organic than just sort of like the simple ABC standard formula from 20 years ago. I think we've kind of evolved beyond that.
I think less important than his origin story, I don't think people care how Matt Murdock got his powers. I think what requires time and effort and delicacy is defining his powers, showing what he can do, showing what he can't do, defining the character and sort of explaining that. Because I feel like it's a confusing power. I mean, it's not, he's got super strength. It's not, he feels micro vibrations. It's a hard sell to some people that he can do what he can do without having some sort of greater superpower. So I feel like they don't need, who cares if he got that superpower from radioactive liquid in his eyes, if he got it at 9 years old or 12 years old. I think what is important is giving people time to meet the character, see his strengths and weaknesses. And that is something that is a small value to me in him being introduced in the universe in cameos or a possible detriment. If he's just popping in and there for a couple of minutes in a property or for a couple of scenes in a property, and you're not really getting any chance to learn anything about the character, I think it would be a waste. But maybe with all of these cameos, they can establish he really is blind. He really cannot see. He actually has ninja skills. He, and just sort of grows that so that when he does have his own property, which we're just hoping that he does have his own property, you can learn more deeply about those skills. But I think knowing his skills is far more important than knowing how he got those skills.
Yeah, I agree. And I think on that point, I think it's the first step, though, for the creators in conveying what he can and can't do is for them collectively, like the creative team, the showrunners or the equivalent, like the writers, the directors, and the actors, all need to have a common shared view of what it is he can and cannot do. And I occasionally felt during the show that wasn't the case. And it's always, this is my hobby horse. It's a whole Daredevil science thing where I feel that with a little bit of, sure, you need some magic fairy dust on top of some of this stuff. But Daredevil is one of the more explainable superhero characters that are out there. And you don't need all that much like magic and just sort of hand waving, yada, yada, past some of this stuff as you would for a different kind of character. Like if you're, Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, like she can phase through walls, which is like, no, you can't. So, don't even bother trying to explain that. You're just going to have to buy it. It's a part of the premise. But I think for a character like Daredevil, there are good ways of like consistently portraying the characters in ways that are not bonkers. And I would love to see more of that. And Marvel, you are welcome to hire me.
Hire her. Worth the money.
Christine is available as a consultant. Yes.
Yes, I know. I'll do it for free. Like I'll pay you money to do it. No, but joking aside, I really think that it like so much could be gained from the creators themselves actually having a shared view of what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what is too much, what is too little. So that is something, but that's also, from a personal point of view, my biggest fear is that they're going to screw it up worse. Because I thought like the show, It's got some issues, but I mean, generally, it does better than the comic book average in most ways. It does, but I'm worried they're going to screw it up. So that's kind of one of those worries that I would have. So there, again, it's like there's an opportunity to do it better, but there's a risk that it might not be as good as it could be. So, and it's like that, I think, with other aspects of the character too, where we've talked about tone and so on earlier, and what would it mean to be maybe appearing as a character in like a show that has a different rating than the show we all knew and loved.
I think one thing that keeps me from being scared in that regard is that they're keeping the same actor. And we're just assuming all the rumors are true for the basis of this discussion. Um, in this world that we're talking about, where it's a soft reboot, they would have the same actor. And we know that nobody knows this version of the character better than Charlie. So unless like he agreed to certain massive changes as he came on board, I feel like he would speak up. If they had Matt flying a jet into space, hearing the absence of heartbeats to know what direction to go, and sensing the horizon line on the plane and stuff like that. I think Charlie would speak up and say, yeah, I know that was in the comics, but I don't think this Matt can do it. I have some faith in that regard.
There are some things that have come up in the comics that I would love to see an example of. And that is to remind everyone that, yes, he's blind. I remember one where he had to defuse a bomb and he was told, cut the red line. He was like, oh, crap. And he didn't know what to do. There was another one when Ben Urich handed him some photographs and he had to go, oh, crap, I can't see this. I think it would be cool to have a couple of reminders of that, to be like, no, he can't see. Not in the way you and I can. He does have limitations. His enhanced senses do not entirely give him vision.
Oh no, there was a great one of him with She-Hulk in San Francisco. Like they're sitting on top of the Golden Gate Bridge and she's talking about how beautiful the sunset is, and he's like, I'll take your word for it. Which, if he shows up in She-Hulk and if they're on the West Coast, we could get some semblance of that exact scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there were a lot of good moments in the show too, where it was it wasn't like directly stated, but there were lots of moments where like he's having Claire read like a text from a phone he found that doesn't have any accessibility apps or anything on it, or doesn't have that on. And things like that. So yeah, there is that. But I think there's also like enough people do not get that he is meaningfully blind, that they probably should do a little bit more just to address that, because like I guess some people are kind of dense. Sorry, people. So I mean that would be nice. But again, I think the key to all of this is having for everyone behind the scenes a kind of a shared view. But yeah, I mean I think we're about ready to kind of get to the end of this conversation, but maybe just first talk a little bit about what is most dear and precious to us going forward, and what is it that we don't want to let go of.
And this is, I think, the time when we, yes, we're a campaign, we're also individuals, so we're going to have our own feelings about this. My personal feeling is that they can ignore anything they want as long as they don't contradict anything. That's where that's my personal line in the sand. If Ben Urich walks in and goes, "Hi, everyone," I'm going to be furious. I don't want them to do something that directly contradicts. If they never want to mention Ben Urich again, or mention that they had a relationship in the past, I'm more okay with that. So that's just me.
I think some of that core group is what is precious. Your Foggy, Karen. I mean, in a perfect world, I do it. The Ellison and Brett Mahoney, that's the richness of the world that they've created. I think it's, I have no idea what, if we will get that. So I don't know how precious that would be to Marvel Studios. But I do think it's precious that Matt has a network around him. Like one of his things is he tries to be such a lone survivor, responsible for himself. but he needs his network. He needs people to lean on. Like when I look at the comics and the comics that I'm least satisfied with, they're the ones where he tries to go out and be Matt Murdoching rather than somebody with a rich network of people around him. Whether it's Kirsten McDuffie or, other characters. I mean, I desperately want Eldon and Deborah back in the series. And I think everybody that's here wants that. I think they were fantastic in their roles. So if you're not going to give us Deborah Emwell as Karen, bring in somebody else, make her Kirsten McDuffie. Don't give us a new Karen. I think I'm with you on that, Kristina. Don't recast. Use that richness of the different networks that he's had, and don't recreate some of these things that we've grown to love.
Bring in Mila Donovan and have her played by a blind woman. That would be amazing.
That would be very cool. Yeah, I think you've both nailed it. So I don't have much to add on that front. I think in terms of tone, I think it's important to stay within the kind of range where he and the other characters are recognizable to us as themselves. However, I also, and especially as a fan of the comics, Daredevil does have range. He's had periods of his life where he's been slightly more upbeat, some where he's been more depressed. But if the writer is good and can get to the core of the character, he will still feel like the same character. It's like how real human beings are. We have off days and we have days where we're feeling kind of quirky. And I mean, for me, it's not, Daredevil has had periods like that too. And you don't have to go back to the Silver Age and Stan Lee to find it. You can find it more recently. And if it's done right, it's just like you get to see, slightly different aspects of the same character, but it's still the same character, the same way the same person can go through different, phases in their life. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Do we have any final words?
I just want to address the people, and I've seen it a couple of times. People come up with this idea of Marvel has to do a hard reboot. They can't do a soft reboot. If they do a soft reboot, it's going to push people back to watch the first 3 seasons on Netflix, and Marvel will never do that. And to that, I say that ship has sailed. Every day on social media, every day I see someone who says, hey, I heard this rumor that Charlie Cox was going to come into the MCU. So I decided to go watch the Netflix Daredevil, and boy, is it good. So that's happening already. So I don't think that that's even a consideration. I don't buy this. They have to do a hard reboot. A soft reboot is completely doable.
Agreed. And I also just want everybody, these are all rumors. Like, there are so many rumors out there that are from sources that have a great track record. There are rumors out there from sources that have no track record. And there are some rumors that we can't even find the source. So I think at this point, we'll know more. We're less than a month from Spider-Man coming out, so soon we'll know how accurate that rumor is. There's going to be other series coming out. Hopefully we'll know more every day as things move forward, but I don't think, if you're getting distressed or down on the campaign or down on the whole idea because of these rumors, take a deep breath, read some of the comics and see how they rebooted him or something like that, and don't let it stress you out. I have faith that Charlie in the role will keep it true to the character that we have grown to love.
Those are great final words. Thanks, guys. And to all of you out there, of course, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are Renew Daredevil on Twitter. We are Save Daredevil pretty much everywhere else. We are on YouTube. We are on Instagram, Facebook. You can find us everywhere. And we have a website. So let us know what your thoughts are on this topic, and we look forward to being back with you soon with another episode of Talk Daredevil. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Talk Daredevil, the official podcast of the Save Daredevil campaign. For more information on Save Daredevil, please visit our website at savedaredevil.com. Remember, Murdochs always get back up.